The sun rose over London on a cool spring morning. Light shined through the windows of Kensington Palace, where the Cambridge family lived. Today was not a normal day. It was the day of the big church service at Westminster Abbey, and the whole royal family would be there. Kate woke up first. She opened her eyes and looked at the clock. It was 6 in the morning. She had to get everyone ready on time. She turned to William, who was still sleeping. "William," she said softly, "time to wake up. We have a long day ahead." William opened his eyes slowly. He knew today was important. The Commonwealth service at Westminster Abbey was one of the biggest events of the year, and this time, all 3 children would come. "I'll help George and Louis get dressed," William said as he got out of bed. In their rooms, the children were starting to wake up. 8-year-old Prince George already knew about his royal duties. One day, he would be king. He sat up in bed when his father came in. "Good morning, Dad," George said. "Is it time for the big church?" William smiled at his son. "Yes, and you need to wear your best suit today." In another room, 6-year-old Princess Charlotte was already looking at her blue dress. She loved pretty clothes and was excited to wear her new dress with matching shoes. "Mummy, will I look like a real princess today?" Charlotte asked when Kate came to help her dress. "You are a real princess," Kate said with a smile. "And today, you'll look extra special." The youngest, 3-year-old Prince Louis was harder to get ready. He ran around his room, not wanting to put on his fancy clothes. "No suit," Louis said, hiding under his bed. Kate got down on her knees. "Louis, remember the boats we might see on the river? You can only see them if you wear your smart clothes." This trick worked. Louis loved boats and came out quickly. Downstairs, the royal staff prepared breakfast. They made simple food that the children liked: toast with jam, eggs, and fruit. The family sat together at the big table. "Remember," William said to the children as they ate, "lots of people will be watching us today. They love to see our family." George nodded seriously. "I'll stand straight and not fidget." Charlotte practiced her royal wave with her toast in hand. "Like this, Daddy." Everyone laughed. Even the serious security men by the door smiled. After breakfast, it was time for final touches. Kate wore a beautiful burgundy coat dress. A hairdresser helped with her hair, pinning it up with shiny clips. William put on his dark blue suit with medals. The children were dressed in matching colors. George in a blue suit like his father, Charlotte in her blue dress, and Louis in a smaller blue suit with shorts. Outside, the royal cars waited, black and shiny, with dark windows so people couldn't see inside. Security men checked everything twice. "The cars are ready, Your Royal Highness," said the head security man to William. William looked at his family. They looked perfect. Kate was checking Louis's hair one last time. George was standing tall, and Charlotte was straightening her dress. "Are we all ready for our big day?" William asked. Kate took a deep breath and smiled. "Ready as we'll ever be." As they walked to the cars, photographers took pictures from far away. The family smiled and waved. They knew this was just the beginning of a very special day. The cars started their engines. The journey to Westminster Abbey was about to begin. No one knew that this day would be remembered for years to come, not just as another royal event, but as a day when the Cambridge family truly shined. The royal cars drove slowly through the streets of London. In the first car, William and Kate sat side by side. Kate looked out of the window at the people on the streets. Many were already waiting behind special barriers, hoping to see the royal family. "Look at all the people," Kate said. "They've been waiting for hours." William nodded. "The children will be surprised by the crowds." In the second car, George, Charlotte, and Louis sat with their nanny, Maria. Maria had worked with the family for many years. She knew how to keep the children calm on big days like this. "Remember to smile and wave when you see people," Maria told them. "They have come a long way to see you." George sat up straight, trying to look grown up. "I know how to do it. I've practiced." Charlotte pressed her face against the window. "There are so many flags," she said, pointing at the red, white, and blue flags hanging from buildings. Louis was more interested in a small toy car he had brought. He made vroom sounds as he moved it along the car seat. "Louis, please be careful with your nice clothes," Maria said gently. The cars moved through famous London streets. They passed Big Ben, the big clock tower that the children loved. They drove alongside the River Thames, where boats moved up and down the water. "Boats," Louis shouted, dropping his toy car and pointing. "Yes, those are river boats," George explained to his little brother. "They take people up and down the river." In the first car, William and Kate talked about the day ahead. "Charlotte seems nervous," Kate said. "It's her first big church service." William smiled. "She'll be fine. Remember how worried we were about George's first big event, and he did so well." Kate nodded, but still felt worried. These public events were hard for children. They had to sit still and be quiet for a long time. Even many grown-ups found it difficult. "At least the music will keep Louis interested," she said. "He loves singing." As they got closer to Westminster Abbey, the crowds got bigger. People stood 5 or 6 deep behind the barriers. Many held cameras or phones to take pictures. Some had brought small British flags to wave. The police were everywhere, making sure everyone was safe. Men in dark suits with earpieces stood at corners, watching carefully. These were the special security people who protected the royal family. In the children's car, Maria helped them get ready for arrival. "Now remember what your parents told you," she said. "When the car stops, wait for the door to be opened. Then step out carefully. Stand straight, smile, and walk slowly." George helped Charlotte fix her hair ribbon that had come loose. "You look very pretty," he told his sister. Charlotte smiled. "Do you think people will take my picture?" "Lots of pictures," George said. "Just don't worry about the cameras. Pretend they're not there." Louis had stopped playing with his toy car. He looked a bit scared now. "Loud?" he asked. He didn't like loud noises. Maria patted his hand. "It might be a bit noisy, but I'll be right behind you. And Mummy and Daddy will be there too." The cars turned onto the road where Westminster Abbey stood. The huge church building came into view. It was very old and very beautiful, with tall pointed towers and big colored windows. "Wow," Charlotte said. "It's like a castle from my storybooks." Even George looked impressed. "That's where kings and queens get crowned," he told his siblings, "and where they have royal weddings." The cars slowed down as they approached the front of the abbey. Lines of people in fancy uniforms stood ready. The big doors of the church were open. The first car stopped. William took a deep breath and looked at Kate. "Here we go," he said. "Time for the Cambridge family to shine." The royal cars stopped in front of Westminster Abbey. Many people stood behind barriers, cheering and waving flags. Cameras flashed like stars in the daytime sky. The noise was very loud. A man in a fancy uniform opened the door of the first car. William stepped out first. He buttoned his blue suit jacket and straightened his tie. Then he turned to help Kate. She took his hand and stepped out gracefully in her burgundy coat dress and matching shoes. The crowd cheered even louder when they saw her. William and Kate smiled and waved to the people. Then they walked to the second car where their children waited. A royal helper opened the door. George came out first. He looked serious but remembered to smile at the people. He was getting better at these public events. At 8 years old, he understood more about his future as king. Charlotte came next. She wore a pretty blue dress with a matching hair ribbon. She gave a small, shy wave to the crowd. Some people said, "Aw," when they saw her. She was a favorite with the public. Last came little Louis. He hesitated at first, looking at all the people and cameras. Then he jumped out with so much energy that Kate had to catch his hand quickly. People in the crowd laughed and took pictures of the lively little prince. "Stay close," Kate told the children. She held Louis's hand tightly. William put his hand gently on George's shoulder. Charlotte walked between her parents. The Abbey's huge wooden doors stood open. Men and women in special church clothes waited to welcome the royal family. The stone steps leading to the door were very old. Hundreds of kings, queens, princes, and princesses had walked on these same steps over many hundreds of years. "Walk carefully on the steps," William told the children. As they got closer to the door, the children looked up at the huge building. Westminster Abbey was very tall with pointed towers reaching up to the sky. The stone walls were the color of honey. Big windows made of colored glass showed pictures of saints and Bible stories. "It's so big," Charlotte whispered. She held her mother's hand a little tighter. Louis pointed up. "Big, big, big," he said loudly. Kate gently reminded him to use his quiet voice. At the door, important church people bowed to William and Kate. A very old man with white hair and special church clothes stepped forward. "Welcome, your royal highnesses," he said. "We are honored by your presence today." William shook his hand. "Thank you, Dean. It's a pleasure to be here with all my family today." The Dean of Westminster smiled at the children. "And these must be the young princes and princess. How wonderful to have you with us." George gave a small bow just as he had been taught. "Thank you for having us," he said in a clear voice. People nearby looked impressed at his good manners. Charlotte did a tiny curtsy. Louis just stared at the Dean's fancy clothes with big eyes. Inside the doorway, the family paused. The inside of Westminster Abbey was amazing. The ceiling was so high it made everyone feel small. Stone columns stood like trees in a forest. The floor was made of smooth stones with names carved into them, kings and queens buried there long ago. "Wow," whispered George. Soft organ music played in the background. The sound floated through the big space. Church helpers guided the family toward their special seats. Other fancy-dressed people were already inside, turning to watch as William, Kate, and their children walked down the main aisle. Kate gently nudged Louis, who had stopped to look at everything. "Come along, darling. We need to find our seats." As they walked deeper into the Abbey, more people stood and bowed their heads as the future king and his family passed by. The Cambridge family walked slowly down the main aisle of Westminster Abbey. The space was huge and filled with people who had come for the special service. Many important people turned to look as William, Kate, and their children passed by. A helper in a black and red uniform showed them to their seats. The seats were in the front row, on the right side of the church. They had red cushions and were more like fancy chairs than normal church seats. "Here are your places, your royal highnesses," the helper said with a small bow. William nodded his thanks. Kate guided the children to their seats. She made sure they sat in the right order. William first, then George, Charlotte, Louis, and herself at the end. This way, both parents could keep an eye on Louis, who might get bored during the long service. "Remember to sit up straight," Kate whispered to the children. "And no talking while people are speaking or singing." George sat down carefully, making sure his suit didn't wrinkle. Charlotte smoothed her blue dress as she sat. Louis climbed onto his seat and immediately started swinging his legs back and forth. "Louis," William said softly, "remember to sit still like we practiced." Louis tried to stop his legs, but it was hard for a 3-year-old boy to sit still for long. Around them, the Abbey was filling up with people. Men wore dark suits with medals and badges. Women wore fancy dresses and hats in many colors. Some people wore military uniforms with gold buttons and stripes. Charlotte leaned closer to Kate. "Mummy, there are so many pretty dresses," she whispered. "Look at that lady with the yellow hat." Kate smiled but put her finger to her lips to remind Charlotte to be quiet. George was looking at the ceiling of the Abbey. It was very high and made of stone with beautiful patterns. The ceiling was so high that George had to bend his head all the way back to see it. "Dad," George whispered to William, "how old is this place?" "Very old," William whispered back. "Parts of it are almost 1,000 years old. Kings and queens have come here for hundreds of years." George looked impressed. He knew that one day he would be king too. Maybe he would sit in a special chair in this same church for his coronation, just like his grandfather and great-grandmother had done. Louis pointed at the big stained glass windows. Sun came through the colored glass, making red, blue, green, and yellow spots of light on the stone floor. "Pretty colors," Louis said, a bit too loudly. Kate reached into her small bag and took out a tiny toy car. She gave it to Louis to keep him busy. He started to roll it quietly on the service program paper on his lap. More important royal family members arrived. When each one came in, everyone stood up. This happened several times, and the children had to keep standing and sitting again. Charlotte started to look tired of standing up and sitting down. "Just a few more," Kate whispered to her. Suddenly, the organ music changed. It became louder and more important sounding. Everyone in the Abbey stood up again. "The Queen is coming," William told the children. "Remember to bow your heads when she passes us." The children stood straight and tall. Even Louis stopped playing with his toy car and looked toward the main door. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Their great-grandmother, the Queen, was about to enter. The huge doors at the end of the Abbey opened wide. Everyone turned to look. A small woman wearing a bright blue outfit and matching hat appeared at the door. Even though she was not very tall, she seemed very important. She walked slowly but with great dignity. "It's Great-Granny," Charlotte whispered excitedly. As the Queen walked past them, William, Kate, and the children bowed and curtsied just as they had practiced. The Queen gave them a special smile as she passed by on her way to her own seat at the front of the church. After the Queen took her seat, everyone else sat down too. The service was about to begin. The big church was now full of people. The air felt warm and smelled of flowers and perfume. A man in gold and white robes stood up. He was the Archbishop, a very important church leader. He welcomed everyone to Westminster Abbey in a loud, clear voice. "Welcome to this special service where we celebrate the Commonwealth nations," the Archbishop said. Louis leaned toward William. "What's Commonwealth?" he whispered. "Commonwealth," William corrected gently. "It's many countries around the world that are friends with Britain. We'll talk more about it later." The choir began to sing. There were 40 singers in red and white robes. Their voices filled the huge space of the Abbey. The sound was so beautiful that Charlotte's mouth opened in surprise. "They sing like angels," she whispered to Kate. The music was one of Charlotte's favorite parts of church visits. She loved to sing herself and knew many of the songs they sang at school. George sat very still, listening carefully. He watched everything with serious eyes. One day, when he was king, he would need to know how these important events worked. Louis was doing his best to be good. He sat with his hands in his lap, but his feet still swung back and forth under the chair. The toy car Kate had given him helped keep him busy during the talking parts. After the first song, everyone stood up for a prayer. The children stood too, copying their parents. George and Charlotte put their hands together like William and Kate did. Louis tried to do the same but got distracted by a shiny button on his father's sleeve. When everyone sat down again, it was time for the readings. Different people came to the front to read from the Bible or special poems. Some wore colorful clothes from their home countries. There were bright African prints, Indian saris, and Pacific Island patterns. "Look at those pretty dresses," Charlotte whispered to Kate, pointing at a woman in a purple and gold outfit. Kate nodded but put her finger to her lips again to remind Charlotte to be quiet. The service had many parts. Sometimes they stood up, sometimes they sat down, sometimes they sang songs, and sometimes they listened to speeches. It was a long time for children to sit still and be quiet. Louis started to get restless after about 30 minutes. He wiggled in his seat and tugged at his collar. "Too tight," he whispered to William, pulling at his shirt collar. William discreetly loosened Louis's collar a tiny bit. Then he found Louis's program paper and showed him how to fold it into a simple paper bird. This kept the little boy busy for a while. Charlotte watched a group of dancers perform in the center aisle. They wore colorful clothes and moved to drum beats. Their feet made soft tapping sounds on the stone floor. Charlotte's feet tapped along under her chair. She loved to dance and wished she could join them. George listened to a young girl read a poem about peace and friendship between nations. The girl looked about his age, but seemed very brave to stand up in front of so many important people. George wondered if he would have to do something like that soon. Kate noticed George's thoughtful expression. She gave him a reassuring smile. She knew he sometimes worried about his future duties. Halfway through the service, there was a special moment when children from many countries brought forward gifts. They carried colorful boxes, flowers, and small flags to the front of the church. "Look," Kate whispered to her children. "Those boys and girls are from countries all around the world." The Cambridge children watched with interest as children their own age participated in the ceremony. The visiting children placed their gifts on a table near the altar. The Queen smiled at the children as they bowed or curtsied to her. Even from a distance, the Cambridge family could see how the Queen's face lit up when she saw the children. "Great Granny likes children," Charlotte whispered to George. "Yes," George agreed. "She always gives us extra biscuits when we visit her." The service continued with more songs and speeches. It had now been over an hour, and little Louis was finding it harder to sit still. He had been very good, but even grown-ups found it hard to sit quietly for so long. Louis leaned against William and whispered, "Daddy, I'm hungry." William smiled at his youngest son. He knew Louis was trying his best. William reached into his pocket and found a small mint candy. He quietly unwrapped it and gave it to Louis. "Just one," William whispered. "Don't tell Mummy." Louis put the mint in his mouth and smiled. He liked having a special secret with his father. On the other side, Charlotte noticed her mother's hair was not quite right. One of Kate's hairpins had come loose, and a small piece of hair was falling down. "Mummy," Charlotte whispered, "your hair is coming undone." Kate touched her hair and felt the loose pin. She tried to fix it without drawing attention. Charlotte wanted to help. "I can fix it," Charlotte whispered. "I'm good at hair clips." Kate smiled and bent her head down a little so Charlotte could reach. Very carefully, Charlotte pushed the pin back into place. Kate gave her daughter a thankful smile and a little wink. George had been watching a man who stood near the Queen. The man carried a long gold stick and wore a very fancy uniform with medals. George leaned toward his father. "Who is that man with the stick?" George asked quietly. "That's the Lord Chamberlain," William explained. "He helps the Queen at special events like this. One day, you will have helpers too." George nodded, thinking about this. He often wondered what it would be like to be king someday. During a hymn, everyone stood up to sing. Kate held the program paper so all three children could see the words. Louis was too young to read, but he liked to pretend. Charlotte sang quietly, but with a clear voice. George sang too, trying to follow the tune carefully. A photographer from the Royal Press Office stood at the side of the church, taking official pictures. He caught this sweet moment of the family singing together. Later, this photo would be loved by people all around the world. After the hymn, an important man from a Commonwealth country gave a speech. He talked about working together and helping each other. The speech was quite long, and even the adults began to look a bit tired. Louis started to fidget again. This time, he dropped his toy car. It made a small noise as it hit the stone floor. Several people looked their way. Louis's face turned red, and he looked like he might cry. Kate quickly picked up the car and gave it back to him. She put her arm around his small shoulders to comfort him. William gave Louis an understanding smile. "It's okay," William whispered. "Almost done." Just then, a funny thing happened. As the man was giving his serious speech, a small bird flew into the abbey through a high window. It fluttered around the ceiling, and everyone looked up. "Look," Louis said, pointing up. His voice was a bit too loud in the quiet church. Some people smiled at the little boy's excitement. Even the Queen looked up at the bird and then gave a small smile in Louis's direction. She understood how hard it was for little ones to be quiet for so long. The bird flew around a few more times and then found its way out through another window. The speech continued, but the short break in formality had been good for everyone. Charlotte leaned close to George. "The bird came to make the boring part more fun," she whispered. George tried not to laugh but couldn't help smiling. Even he was getting tired of sitting still. Kate noticed her children getting restless. She opened her small purse and took out 3 tiny chocolate candies wrapped in gold paper. Very quietly, she gave one to each child. "For being so good," she whispered. "Just a few more minutes." The children's faces lit up at this unexpected treat. It would help them get through the last part of the long service. Finally, the service came to an end. The Archbishop said a final prayer, and the choir sang one last beautiful song. Then it was time for the Queen to leave first. Everyone stood as she walked slowly down the aisle. She stopped briefly beside William and Kate's row. "The children were very good today," the Queen said to Kate with a small smile. Kate thanked her. The children gave small bows and curtsies to their great-grandmother. The Queen gave them a special nod before continuing her walk out of the Abbey. After the Queen left, it was time for William, Kate, and the children to follow. They walked slowly down the main aisle. Many people smiled at them. Some people bowed or curtsied as they passed. "Walk nicely," Kate reminded the children quietly. "Remember to smile." Outside the Abbey, bright sunshine greeted them. After the dim light inside the church, the sun seemed very bright. Many more people waited behind barriers on the street. When they saw the Cambridge family, they cheered and waved flags. William led his family toward the area where they would meet some of the waiting people. Royal helpers had picked some special people for the family to talk to. There were children from local schools, old soldiers, charity workers, and people who had done good things in their communities. "We'll spend 15 minutes meeting people," William told the children. "Be polite and say thank you if someone gives you something." The family spread out a little along the barrier. Kate stayed close to Louis. William kept an eye on George and Charlotte. A little girl with a bunch of flowers was waiting. She looked about Charlotte's age, but seemed very shy. She held the flowers tightly but didn't speak. Charlotte noticed the girl and walked over to her. "Are those flowers for my mummy?" Charlotte asked in a kind voice. The girl nodded, still too shy to speak. "They're very pretty," Charlotte said. "Would you like me to take you to her?" The girl nodded again. Charlotte gently took her hand and led her to Kate. People watching this thought it was very sweet. "Mummy, this girl has flowers for you," Charlotte said. Kate bent down to the little girl's level. "Thank you so much. What's your name?" "Emma," the girl said in a quiet voice. "Well, Emma, these are beautiful flowers. Did you pick them yourself?" Kate asked. Emma shook her head. "My mum helped me," she said, pointing to a woman standing nearby who was taking pictures and smiling proudly. Kate waved to Emma's mother. Then she took the flowers and gave Emma a small hug. Charlotte stood beside her mother, looking pleased that she had helped. Meanwhile, George was meeting an old man with many medals on his jacket. The man had fought in wars long ago. "You're going to be king someday," the old man said to George. "Yes, sir," George replied politely. "You'll be a good one, I think," the man said. "You have kind eyes like your father and grandmother." George thought about this. No one had told him he had kind eyes before. He liked that idea. "Thank you," George said. "I'll try my best." William, who was standing nearby, heard this exchange and felt proud of his son. Louis was having fun waving at everyone. He jumped up and down with excitement when people waved back. Kate held his hand to make sure he didn't run off. "Hello, hello," Louis called happily to the crowd. People laughed and called back to him. They took many pictures of the lively little prince. A woman gave Louis a small teddy bear wearing a Union Jack vest. Louis hugged it tightly. What do you say? Kate reminded him. Thank you, Louis said loudly. William checked his watch. They had been outside for 10 minutes now. The children were doing well, but he could see they were getting tired after sitting so long in the service. Louis was leaning against Kate's leg. Charlotte's perfect posture was beginning to slouch a little. Just then, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. It was someone William had not seen for many years, someone who brought back special memories. William looked again at the person in the crowd. It was an elderly woman with white hair and kind eyes. She wore a simple blue coat and held a small photo frame in her hands. William knew her face right away. She was Mrs. Jenkins, who had worked for his mother, Princess Diana, many years ago. "Excuse me a moment," William said to the royal helper. He walked over to where the old woman stood. "Mrs. Jenkins," William said warmly, "it's wonderful to see you." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "Prince William," she said, "I wasn't sure you would remember me." "Of course I remember you," William replied. "You used to make the best chocolate biscuits when I was a boy." Mrs. Jenkins smiled. "Your mother loved those biscuits too." William turned and motioned for Kate to join him. She came over, bringing the children with her. "Kate, this is Mrs. Jenkins. She worked for my mother for many years," William explained. "Mrs. Jenkins, this is my wife Kate, and our children." Kate shook Mrs. Jenkins' hand. "It's lovely to meet you." Mrs. Jenkins looked at the three children with wonder in her eyes. "They are beautiful," she said softly. "Your mother would be so proud." George stood tall, understanding this was someone important from his father's past. Charlotte smiled shyly. Louis waved his new teddy bear at the lady. Mrs. Jenkins held out the small photo frame she had been holding. "I brought this for you," she said to William. "I thought you might like to have it." William took the frame. Inside was an old photo of himself as a small boy, sitting on his mother's lap. They were both laughing. William hadn't seen this picture before. "Where did you get this?" William asked, his voice a little unsteady. "I took it myself, one afternoon in the garden at Kensington Palace," Mrs. Jenkins explained. "Your mother asked for a copy, but I kept the original. I thought today would be a good day to give it to you." William looked at the photo for a long moment. "Thank you," he said quietly. "This means a lot to me." The children peeked at the photo with curiosity. "Is that you, Daddy?" Charlotte asked, pointing at the little boy in the picture. "Yes," William said. "And that's my mother, your grandmother Diana." "She's pretty," Charlotte said. "She was very pretty," Mrs. Jenkins agreed. "And kind too. She would have loved all of you very much." George looked thoughtful. "Did she like Westminster Abbey?" he asked. Mrs. Jenkins smiled. "She did. She got married there, you know." "Just like Daddy and Mummy," Charlotte said, looking at her parents. William handed the photo to Kate carefully. He turned back to Mrs. Jenkins. "Would you like to meet the children properly?" Mrs. Jenkins nodded, her eyes bright with tears of happiness. William introduced each child. "This is George, our eldest, and this is Charlotte, and our youngest, Louis." George shook Mrs. Jenkins' hand like a proper gentleman. "Nice to meet you," he said. Charlotte smiled. "Did you really make good biscuits?" she asked. Food was always interesting to her. Mrs. Jenkins laughed. "I did. Maybe someday I could teach you how to make them." Louis, who had been listening quietly for once, suddenly stepped forward. He held out his teddy bear to Mrs. Jenkins. "For you," he said. Everyone looked surprised. Louis loved his new bear, but he wanted to give it to this special lady who knew his grandmother. "Oh dear," Mrs. Jenkins said, touched by the gesture. "That's very kind, but this is your bear." "Share," Louis insisted. Kate knelt beside Louis. "That's very kind of you, Louis, but why don't we invite Mrs. Jenkins to visit us someday? Then you can show her your bear and all your other toys." Louis thought about this and nodded. "Visit us," he said to Mrs. Jenkins. William smiled at the old woman. We'd love to have you visit. I think we have a lot to talk about. Mrs. Jenkins wiped a tear from her eye. I would be honored, she said. The royal helper came over to remind William that they needed to leave soon. But before they moved on, Mrs. Jenkins said something that touched William deeply. She's still with you, you know, she said quietly. In your children's smiles, I see her every day. It was time for the royal family to leave Westminster Abbey. They had spent nearly 30 minutes greeting people, and the children were getting tired. Louis was rubbing his eyes, and Charlotte's perfect posture was gone. Even George looked ready to go home. Time to say goodbye, William told the children. He carefully put the special photo from Mrs. Jenkins in his inside jacket pocket, keeping it safe. The royal helpers guided them back to their waiting cars. The crowd still cheered and waved as the family made their final waves before getting into the vehicles. In the first car, William and Kate sat close together. Kate took William's hand. Are you all right? She asked softly. That was quite a surprise, meeting Mrs. Jenkins. William nodded. It was, but a good surprise. I hadn't seen her since I was a teenager. The photo she gave you is lovely, Kate said. I'll frame it for our bedroom, William replied. The children should see pictures of my mother. In the second car, the three children sat with their nanny Maria again. Louis was already falling asleep, his head nodding as the car moved smoothly through London streets. I'm hungry, Charlotte said. When will we eat lunch? Soon, Maria promised. There's a nice lunch waiting at home. George was quiet, thinking about everything he had seen and heard. He looked out of the window at the people still waving at their car. Why do people care so much about us? He asked Maria. Maria thought carefully before answering. Because you are part of Britain's story. People feel connected to your family. They've watched your father grow up, and now they're watching you grow up too. George nodded, still thinking. And one day they'll watch my children grow up. Yes, Maria said. That's how it works. As the cars drove through London, the children saw famous sights again. Big Ben, the River Thames, and tall buildings. But now, they were too tired to be excited about them. I want my bed, Louis said sleepily. When they arrived at Kensington Palace, the children perked up a bit. Home was always the best place to be, even when your home was a palace. Inside, the staff had prepared a simple lunch of the children's favorite foods, sandwiches, fruit, and cheese. There was also a special treat, chocolate biscuits for dessert. Just like Mrs. Jenkins used to make, William said with a smile. After lunch, Louis went straight for his nap. Charlotte and George were allowed some free time to play. They changed out of their fancy clothes into normal, comfortable outfits. In the palace garden, Charlotte picked some flowers. She wanted to press them in a book to remember this special day. George kicked a football around, happy to be active after sitting still for so long. Later that afternoon, William found Kate in their sitting room. She was looking at photographs on her phone, official pictures from the day that the palace photographer had sent. The children were amazing today, Kate said, showing William a perfect photo of all three children sitting nicely in Westminster Abbey. They were, William agreed. Even Louis managed to behave most of the time. Kate laughed. Did you see the faces he was making during the long speech? I did, William grinned, just like I used to do at that age, according to my father. They looked through more photos together. There was one of Charlotte fixing Kate's hairpin, one of George listening intently to the choir, and several of Louis's excited waves to the crowd. The last photo was of all five of them, standing outside Westminster Abbey, the grand building behind them, the sun shining on their faces. They looked happy, strong, and united, a modern royal family. We should frame this one, Kate said. William nodded. And one day, when they're older, we'll tell them about today. About meeting Mrs. Jenkins and seeing the Queen smile at Louis when the bird flew in. And about Charlotte helping that shy little girl, Kate added. As evening came, The palace settled into its normal routine. The exciting day at Westminster Abbey was over, but its memories would stay with the family for years to come. Outside the palace gates, newspapers were already printing tomorrow's headlines. The royal family shines. William, Kate, and children grace Westminster Abbey. The pictures showed exactly what the public loved, a real family carrying on royal traditions while making new memories of their own.